And now it's Deborah Kobylt Live.
Hi, everybody, and thanks for joining us today on Deborah Kobylt Live. And our show today is sponsored by Sambuco. They are black elderberry gummies filled with lots of vitamin C, zinc, and all kinds of good stuff for your immune system. Please welcome to our show Dr. Adrienne Youdim. Thanks so much for being here, Doctor.
Hi, Deborah. I'm so glad to be here with you.
I'm thrilled. I've been reading and thumbing through your book, Hungry for More. Terrific book, and we're going to get into this very, very shortly. You are also host of the popular podcast, Health Bite. Also been listening to your show. It's been very, very valuable to me and so many other people that I know as well. Tell us a little bit more about you and what you do and how you help so many of us struggling with food.
So I'm an internist and I specialize in nutrition and weight loss. I have a medical practice here in Beverly Hills where I see patients a few days a week. I also have the Health Bite podcast, which is intended to offer people small, actionable bites towards health and well-being. And yes, I wrote the book Hungry for More, which explores the emotional, spiritual hungers that quite frankly are universal and that I've seen in myself and in my medical practice.
Yeah. I like the way you wrote this book, if I may. Okay. Hungry for perfection, hungry for self-love. In other words, what are you hungry for? Are you hungry for understanding, for healing, for patience, for grieving? And I love that you give us a quick bite of each one of those. And a lot of these resonated with me, I have to tell you. Talk to me about the thought behind this book, and making it personal is great too.
Yeah, so our strategies, our medical strategies for weight loss are all about suppressing hunger. So we write for, prescription medications that are appetite suppressants or evidence-based dietary plans that help suppress hunger. And I still do those in my medical practice. But as I, over 15 years of listening to patients, as I listen to patients in the office, I always was attuned to the fact that there's this underlying hunger, this emotional hunger, this spiritual hunger that was happening at the same time. And that perhaps this hunger wasn't intended to be suppressed and squashed and fed, but really leaned into, because these hungers, it turns out, are universal and they are psychological needs. And when they go unmet, they pop up like a hunger that is experienced almost viscerally, like a true physiologic hunger for food, except it's not food that we're really hungry for.
Even if you go through and do some of the hard work, because I agree with you, it's really often not the food. I can only use myself as an example, and I will use food or enjoy food for everything. If I'm having a great day, if I'm not having a great day, if I go for a run and feel like, oh, I got to have something, because why not? I just went for a run. Time wise, right? It's like that. It's noon. I got to have lunch. We're also programmed breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Don't forget your snacks. And breaking that has been a struggle for me much of my life. I've tried suppressants. They actually worked, but I think they made me too agitated, right? And I'm trying to come to grips with the how. How do I get it under control? Because you might know what's troubling you, but then you go talk to that little person that's on your shoulder that's going, take the pizza, take the pizza. And even though I should walk away from it, I have a hard time getting in front of it. Do you know what I mean? What do you say to that? How do you help people like myself, for example?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think everything you're telling and everything you're sharing is so kind of spot on with everybody's experience. And first of all, let me just say that there's science behind that. There's science behind the fact that our emotions drive our hunger. And so they've shown that when people are stressed, anxious, irritable, bored, any kind of emotion, it literally hijacks our hunger hormones. So it shifts those hormones in a direction that makes us feel hungry, even when we're not. So there's something very physiologic about that. And it is like an awe, right? Because if you can understand that this is something that is in our physiology, you can have a little bit more compassion for that, right? And compassion for the fact that it's a process. And I know everyone hates to hear this. It's so kitschy to say, be in the journey, not in the destination. But it's the damn truth, right? We are set up in our society to be goal-oriented. All of us, myself included, right? Finish high school, go to college, get the degree. Now it's med school. Now it's this residency. Oh, you had the first child. When are you going to have the second? It's like never ending. But it's so, this linear way of being is really unhuman. We are not linear in our lives. We are one step forward, two steps back. We are reconfiguring, reconsidering, pivoting, transforming. And so that's critical to really getting in front of this, is understanding that it's going to be a process whereby there are wins, and there are mistakes and setbacks, and that's just part of the deal.
But how do you get in front of it? Let's say you've been doing it for years, because that tends to be common. Or and you're trying to get to a healthy point mentally where you say, it doesn't matter if I've had a bad day, a good day, or whatever, I got it, cut out the pizza, or at least cut out 12 pieces of pizza. In my opinion, I'm not a doctor, feel like it's an addiction in a way, almost the way drinking or drugs would be, because often it's hard to say no. You just say, well, just this one. How can you get past that?
Yeah, it is to your point, it is a soothing mechanism, right? So when you drink, you get a dopamine hit. When you smoke, you get a dopamine hit. When you have sex, you get a dopamine hit. And when you eat chocolate chip cookies, you get a dopamine hit. So it is a way of changing your state of being, changing the mood, changing the state, and also getting this feeling of comfort, pleasure, reward. There isn't a one stop, one answer fits all answer to your question. But I would say that the universal theme is, in that moment, right, that you're not hungry, physiologically hungry, like you've eaten, the third piece of pizza, you're not hungry for the fourth. In that moment, what is it that we're hungry for, right? What is it in that moment? Is it that we've been sitting in front of the Zoom camera for the last 8 hours and we're hungry for respite? Is it that we have been disconnected from our friends because we've been hunkering down, quarantining, and we're hungry for connection? Maybe your desk is a total mess, right? And it's driving you nuts, and you're hungry for clarity or sanity. What is it? And I would argue that it is not the same thing all the time, right? So as I describe these 40 or so hungers in these various chapters, you may have noticed that every chapter started with a patient, but I gave my own rendition of that. Some of them I could relate to myself more wholeheartedly, and some of them less. But nonetheless, I could relate to every single hunger at some point in my life. So the question is really in that moment. And so even for the individual, there's not one answer, right? There's many answers. But in that moment, like, pause, right? I know I'm not hungry for food. I'm hungry for something. What is that itch, right? What is that thing that I'm longing for? And the beauty of this is that while we kind of talk about it very superficially as like pounds on the scale, this is a way of really being authentic, really aligning with what it is that you need in your life. And so I see this struggle with food as like a microcosm, really, of something so much more profound.
And that requires a lot of work to figure that out. I mean, it really does, doesn't it? Or What if you know
Yes.
what that is, but you still
Yes.
don't have the strength to
Well,
deal with it? Go ahead.
Well, first of all, yes, it, it takes a lot of work, right? What doesn't take a lot of work?
Yeah.
We talked about this. Having your own highly coveted show, it takes a lot of work. Having a successful marriage takes a lot of work. Parenting takes a lot of work. Getting through that 4 years and getting the degree takes a lot of work. So why would we think that something as complex as our own psyche wouldn't take work, right? It's going to take work.
In your opinion, what tends to work? That's kind of a loaded question, right? But in your practice, forget opinion, in your practice, is it journaling? Is it going for a walk? Is it thinking and meditating about something like nature? Is it all the above?
Yeah, I think your suggestions are all really on point. And I think the common denominator to all of those is like time and space, right? If we are doing what we often do, which is get up, pack lunches, drive the kids to school, come home, blow dry the hair, get to work, finish work, run home, maybe pick something up, cook dinner. When we're constantly doing, there is no time for reflection. So however you or the person can create time and space, maybe it is going for a walk, maybe it's sitting under a tree, maybe it's meditating or taking 5 minutes to just be quiet. For me, it is journaling. I mean, I write every single day and have virtually written every single day since I was 6 years old. It is a very therapeutic thing for me to do. But essentially find that meditative thing where you can slow down, right? Be quiet and kind of tap into what that intuition is telling you. Because I really, we feel viscerally, we feel things, right? Like you meet someone and if you're keen to it, you have a visceral reaction. Sometimes you're and you have this negative kind of reaction. Sometimes you have this positive, you move towards someone or something. Our intuition is constantly speaking to us if we can pay attention. And so that meditative thing, whatever it is, I think is an opportunity to dial into what that hunger is in that moment.
Let's talk a little bit about you, because you're right. In each of those chapters, you do talk about you. Let's talk about your own journey with food, can we? Absolutely. And I'm actually also going to pick out a quote that I footnoted while you're talking. So go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I share in the book that the first time I thought of myself, or it occurred to me that I was thought of as being overweight, was when I was 6 years old, when somebody kind of reprimanded me for putting too much food on my plate, some random person at my family member's house. And I think that's important because we can plant those seeds in our children unknowingly. And those, in my case, it wasn't my mom, but those seeds can be planted. I talk about when I was in middle school and elementary school, I, in my own head, thought I was enormous. When I go back and calculate the numbers now, I wasn't obese. I was never, a thin little person, but I never hit these criteria, even for being overweight. But in my mind, I was. And another common thing that I hear a lot of times from patients is, wow, all my life I thought I was overweight, but I go back and look at pictures now and I wasn't. That is such a common theme.
And by the way, this was before social media, right? So people always say social media is terrible for one's self-esteem. It's like, true. But you want to know something? It's been going on long before social media, because I remember feeling like that in school. I also remember being a little kid and having a little too much on my plate, and being an Italian girl, my family would be like, oh my God, this is wonderful. Look at her. She's eating 15 raviolis and she's 3 years old. It's like, thanks.
Yeah,
Like
it's
I
like
could
either
have,
kind of attention is negative attention, right? And
ugh,
to your point, yes, social media has exacerbated all of this, but no one is immune. The studies show that by the time you are in your late teens, that over 80% of girls have some type of body image issue or distorted body image. And it's not just women. We don't talk about the men enough, but men have it too. And guess what, Deborah? Even normal weight and underweight people have an incidence of negative body image in terms of thinking that they're overweight, even when they're underweight. So really, no one is immune from this potential dilemma.
you know, doctor, let's get into the psychology of that. Can't we just let people be? I mean, I believe that the Dove commercials, right, and some underwear commercials, I'm not sure, they're showing people of various body types, various skin colors, and it's so refreshing. And I think they're all beautiful, all of them. The super thin, model-y types, and the women who have a little extra going on, and the men. I think they're beautiful, each and every one. And it would be wonderful if we saw a whole lot more of that. I think it's starting to change, but whether it's on TV shows, commercials, whatever, I mean, let's face it, we don't all come in with the same body. Do you think we're starting to go toward that a little bit in society?
Mean, I do. I do think that we are much more keen to this issue, and we're pushing that the people who are putting images in front of us be keen to it as well. But yeah. I'm going to offer a counter, because at the end of the day, we can't necessarily change what's outside of us, but we can change in terms of social media, our consumption of it. But even more importantly, how about we start with what we are saying and doing to ourselves, right? And I share this in the book, that it is said that we have 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day, and that 60% of them are negative. So what I tell my patients is, that's me, that's you, that's Beyonce, that's President Obama. I mean, that's everybody, right? This is the human condition. So why don't we start with becoming aware and acknowledging, what are we saying to ourselves, right? When you wake up in the morning and you grab your phone and you realize you forgot to do something yesterday, what do you say to yourself? When you pull up social media and see an image of a perfectly photoshopped human, what are you saying to yourself? When you get into the bathroom and take off your clothes to get in the shower and get a peek of yourself in the mirror, what do you say to yourself, right?
That just happened to me, and I said, oops. So honestly, it really did, about an hour ago, before, as I was showering for the show, I thought,
so we can become aware, right, to what we are saying to ourselves, that negative constant tendency of negative talking and limiting words and beliefs. That's where we can have impact.
Yeah, and I really believe in supporting one another. I have a great group of friends, and we call each other, and we have this thing where we have to say something nice about one another, like not bullshit, but something real, like hey, I love what you did today about this or that. And it really just matters. It helps to reframe. I guess what you're talking about is we got to reframe how we look at ourselves first and foremost, right? Because it does start here. I know it's so cliche, but sometimes cliches are real, right? Starts right here. Let's talk a little bit about emotions, food also, and tradition. Okay, remember I told you about my upbringing being Italian. I'll tell you what I've noticed about my own tradition being Italian, where food is sort of everything. When I go to Italy, it's a more refined way of eating. It's a little slower. And even my relatives who are way more connected to the old, not old, but the traditions that I grew up with, they take more time. Honestly, this comes down to our lifestyle. We need to take more time. We can't just throw the food in, eat it quickly, pick it up. Time. You sit down with some respect for yourself. That's how I look at it. Respect. A real fork and napkin. and not everything disposable, because we're not disposable. I'm trying to tell myself that, you know. Could you comment about that, about food and tradition?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I write about this in the book, and
Yes.
I can't quote it perfectly, but there is a rabbinic scholar, a Jewish scholar, who says in the Talmud that you should always eat as though you're eating with company, right? So like sitting to a table, right? Taking time to eat. There's actually in Japan a long time practice of not eating while standing. It's actually
Yes.
part of their tradition, right? And if you go to Japan, you may notice that in some areas it's even against the law to walk while you eat. What is that practice? That is a practice in respecting yourself, respecting your food, giving it the honor, the time, the attention that it deserves, being mindful about what you eat. I mean, when we grab something on the way to the car or from the desk as we pass offices, are we mindful of what we're eating? Do we even taste that food? I don't know. You know, oftentimes you don't even taste it because you're talking to someone or doing something, and so you aren't respecting the food and therefore not yourself. So a lot of times people will say, you know, well, it's in my tradition. I come from a big Italian family where all we do is eat, or a big Jewish family or a Persian family. I mean, I can relate to that. But what are we missing in those traditions? We're missing the pause, the mindfulness. Let's talk about prayer. I mean, I don't pray before I eat, but what are we actually doing? What are people doing when they pray before and after meals? It is a gratitude practice, but it is creating pause, right? It is kind of calming people down, making them ready, making them anticipate the food, and truly in the anticipation, savoring the food, right? If we were to really savor our food, perhaps we wouldn't need as much, right? We'd be satisfied because we were truly getting the enjoyment that we need out of it. So when we talk tradition, we can't pick and choose the aspects of tradition, right? We have to see kind of the whole experience and how that tradition has taught us to interact with our meals.
I want you to know, just in what you said there, it was very calming to me. It was soothing. And if anyone gets anything out of this podcast today, I hope they get one thing out: the pause, because you talked about the pause. And doctor, that really is everything. Just as you talked about with the Talmud, as you talked about not standing and eating, as in Japan they don't do, as you talked about, you know, sitting down, saying a prayer, the gratitude, it's all the same. It's taking a pause. And I know I have to mention something that you know I love that you do. What is that? Right here, your bars. And people, I'm not getting paid to do this because she knows I love them. I'm always texting her. Where else can I find them? I order them online. I go to the store. I love these, and I love the thought behind them. They're called the Dell Bar, right?
Yes.
Can you talk to me about these that you developed? And honestly, she didn't even know that I was doing this, but I love these bars that doctor has developed. Tell us about those and the thought behind it.
So, you know, my practice is in weight loss, right? And so what I always, I'm a proponent of what I call actionable and compassionate strategies. So yes, I talk to people about the emotional piece, but there also has to be practicality. And so some of the practicality in how we feed ourselves is really nourishing ourselves, right? Like truly nourishing. And we do have on the go lives, more so, you know, pre-pandemic. And so my goal in creating this bar was really to create something that was nutrient dense, high protein, low calorie, so that it serves the purpose, with clean functional ingredients. I call it Dell Bar because, you know, my background, as I mentioned, is my parents are from Iran. I was born in La Jolla, but my parents are from Iran. And Del is a word that means stomach. but it also has this spiritual quality of heart and soul. And so again, it goes back to actionable and compassionate, right? We should nourish ourselves in a very functional way through our stomachs, but we also should nourish ourselves mind and body, right? Emotionally and spiritually. And that's where the name came from.
Love it. Thank you so much, because I enjoy them personally, and they really do taste good. Let's talk a little bit before I let you go about the podcast Health Bite. And I asked you off camera before we started our show, why not Health Bites? Because I thought Health Bite, even in that name, says one bite at a time. Talk to me very briefly about the podcast and how people can find it.
Yeah, thank you. So yes, Health Bite was intended to be just that, small and actionable. And the science shows that, like, New Year's, resolutions roll around, and we want to eat clean, start exercising, floss every night, and do our perfect skin regime nightly, right? We can't accomplish things effectively in a durable way when we take on too much at one time. And so my goal with Health Bite was really to do just that, to give people small, actionable guidance to make small changes that are impactful over time.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I implore people to listen. Again, it brings me to that moment of calm, peace, and pause. And again, that's our word for the podcast. At least my podcast with you today is take a pause. How can people find you? Because I know that you counsel, of course. You've got the podcast, the book, which it's a great read, because I personally like when I can pick up a book, thumb through it, go back. Oh, that's an interesting chapter, because you'll find yourself in here. So talk to me about how people can find you.
Yeah, even the book actually was intended to be small bites. The chapters are super short so that people stay engaged. So everything can be found at dradrienneyoudim.com on my website. People can also find me at Dr. Adrienne Youdim on Instagram. I do have a practice. I see patients in Beverly Hills, and I can see people in California under my medical license. I also have the book that I think really is it is a universal read, Deborah, because I wrote it based on the same patient scenarios that I was hearing over and over and over again for 15 years. So if I'm hearing the same stories in my office, then it must be true that those stories are out there. Health Bite can be found, anywhere people podcast. And on the website, I also created a 30-day journaling guide with 30 days of writing prompts, which for people who, to your first question, maybe don't know how to find that pause and that self-inquiry, it was intended to do so. And while I do nutrition and weight loss, this is not really weight loss intended. This kind of deep dive and self-discovery, I think, is valuable for all of us to engage in on an ongoing basis.
Right. It's a discipline, regardless of what it is that you're working through in life, whether it's, finances, food. There's so many other relationships. Right. So it's very valuable in all of those areas. I thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Adrienne Youdim.
It's been fun, Deborah.
Yeah, it's been wonderful. I'm going to keep up with those health bars. I call them my health bars. They're delicious. It's interesting. They are not addictive, because often I will have a bar and I'll want another one and another one. There's something about them. They're satisfying. I can have half of one, and they're terrific. So keep those up for me personally. If you do anything for me, that's what I'm asking for. So thank you so much. And please look up Dr. Adrienne Youdim if you live here locally. I'm sure that you Zoom with your clients, and on the website, and look up her podcast, pick up the book. I appreciate you being here so much, Doctor. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today on Deborah Kobylt Live. And now, before we go, we're going to be playing a little commercial that I made about Sambuco. Thank you for being here. I'm Deborah Kobylt, and we will see you next time.
There's nothing more important than taking care of yourself, and if you're not feeling your best, you can't be your best for anyone else either. I've been using Sambucol to help support my immune system, and I've noticed a huge difference in how I feel. I'm more alert, I have more energy, and I believe that's because Sambucol is powered by nature's superfruit, black elderberry. It's good for me, and it's combined with vitamin C and zinc, too. I feel that Sambucol really helps to keep my immune system strong, particularly during these times. And they have these super delicious all-natural gummies, powder to add to my water, chewable tablets, and a syrup that tastes amazing. Get 15% off of your order of $9.99 or more at sambucol.com. Use DEB15 for your special 15% off discount. That's sambucol.com and mark down DEB15 and join me in keeping a healthy immune system.